Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Those who do not learn from the past are destined to repeat the same mistake over and over again. The one big mistake that Zimbabwe has been repeating is the failure to hold free, fair, and credible elections. For 44 years now and counting, we have had rigged elections. And we are heading for 2028, which is the next national elections. And the evidence on the ground is we are heading straight for that, another rigged election. The headlines was in today's Daily Mail, Daily News, that Chamisa and Zanu PF are having talks. Talks about what? This is absolutely infuriating. This is just another time-wasting gimmick. Why do we need these talks? Benjamin.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
Why do we need these talks?
I share the same frustration. Let's talk about Zanu PF. Zanu PF has been on the record over and over again to say the only platform that they will use to have talks is through Pollard, the political, whatever the whole thing stands for, which I personally think is a waste of time, because I've yet to see anything fruitful come out of it, except somebody just standing in front of the others and addressing them. There is no talk. It's one person talking. So in such an environment, I don't expect any progress. And now for them to start saying there is talks, or to say Chamisa blew up, I think probably they mean Pollard, maybe. That's my view. And I don't think Zanu PF has changed that stance. In terms of the only way we can dialogue is by Chamisa joining in Pollard. That's my understanding from a Zanu point of view.
Well, the Zanu PF calling for talks, one can only say it's the only reason why they would want talks is that they realize that the 2023 elections were condemned by both SADC and the AU. Honestly, if the opposition had not participated and enticed or conned ordinary Zimbabweans to participate too, I honestly believe that SADC would have denied Zanu PF legitimacy. Zanu PF learned the big lesson in 2008. The regime blatantly cheated in the March election when the counting was being done, when it realized that the regime, Zanu PF, was losing. They interrupted the process, told ZEC that they should stop counting and declaring the results. And the whole process was hijacked, and Mnangagwa himself was at the head of that. And he admits it and boasts about it. And they went on to spend another 6 weeks recounting 5 million votes. And in the process, watering down Morgan Tsvangirai's win. According to Mugabe's admission, 73% was watered down to 47%, just enough to drop below the 50% plus one to force the runoff. And during the runoff itself, Zanu PF used blatant wanton violence to make sure that Zanu PF, Mugabe rather, wins the runoff. Both SADC and the AU refused to accept those results. And that's forcing Zanu PF to go into the GNU. Zanu PF, the most important lesson the regime learned is that they have got to abandon their one-party dictatorship in favor of a multi-party system. And in this particular case, they've been able to successfully bribe the opposition to stop implementing any meaningful reforms. And they've tried to keep this facade that Zimbabwe is still a multi-party democracy. In 2013, they went into those elections. The process was so flawed, so illegal, that really the opposition had no reason to participate in those elections, but they participated regardless, out of greed. Zanu PF has since realized that as long as they can bribe the opposition to participate in these flawed elections with a few seats, they'll get away with it. Because the facade will be maintained that Zimbabwe is a multi-party democracy. Last year, both SADC and the AU shocked Zanu PF because they thought they had the basis covered. As long as the opposition participates and entice their followers to participate, both AU and SADC will rubber stamp the process. So when the AU and SADC refused to rubber stamp the process, Zanu PF was shocked. And what these talks are all about is trying to give Zanu PF legitimacy, to try to say to SADC and the AU, listen, yes, the elections were not clear, but we have talked among ourselves and we have agreed for the way forward. These talks could even end up, as some people have suggested, in some form of government of national unity and thus postpone the 2028 elections. That, to me, Benjamin, is the only thing that I can see Zanu PF would be interested in achieving in these particular talks. But the point is just one last point. The point that must be emphasized here is that Zanu PF, the problem with Zimbabwe is the failure to hold free, fair, and credible elections, and that's why the reason Zimbabwe is a failed state. And these talks are not about resolving that problem. It's only about giving a facade, maintaining the facade of a healthy and functioning democracy. And I think that is Zanu PF's intention in these talks.
You know, my question would be, why is the opposition, particularly, why would Chamisa want to have talks with somebody that, you know, he always claims that is illegitimate? that is in a place that is supposed to be his. And then the only logical explanation that I can come up with is we will talk to them as long as we will get a few of what of of what is of power, if I may say. A bite at the cherry, a bite at the at the gravy train, or a seat at the gravy train. That is all that you can think of. Because listen here, we what can you talk to Zanu PF about, knowing how Zanu PF operates, how they run their ship, right? We are looking at, we want an opposition that is 365 degrees away from the one that that we are seeing in Zanu PF. We want the exact opposite of Zanu PF. So now, are we then saying that the opposition want to have talks to dilute Zanu PF, or is it just a matter of the gravy train? And I think that the gravy train is all that seems to be mattering here. There is nothing that you can talk to Zanu PF. I mean, these are two different. Well, it should appear, but now it does not appear that these are two different individuals or organizations that are so far, far apart. I I'm now wondering what talks. Okay, what honestly could you talk to Zanu PF about? Zanu PF are thugs. Zanu PF are murderers. Zanu PF has failed. Period. What then do you want to go and talk to them about? Let us dialogue. What dialogue can you bring out? What do I cannot see a picture. I'm trying to vision it in my head. What are we going to bring out? The previous year GNU, that didn't do much if in terms of what it was made for in the first place. So I don't know, from an opposition point of view, I would be not even wanting any talks. Firstly, because they're illegitimate. Secondly, you're so far apart. You're preaching democracy. They are so much against it. They are preaching, that they are the demigods. They are supposed to be, there for forever and ever and ever. It is their right to rule. So if it is the two different or too far apart, organizations, I don't know. If it's not, one thing that binds us is got to be money and positions. That's the only logical explanation that I can come up with.
I totally agree with you. I think when it comes to Nelson Chamisa, the only thing Nelson Chamisa would want is for him to be given a seat in some form of coalition or government of national unity. That is all he cares about. Let's not forget that during the GNU of 2008 to 2013, people like Nelson Chamisa and his colleagues were in the GNU. They failed to implement even one token reform. They were given ministerial cars and all the trappings of high office. And they knew that Zanu PF did not want any reforms implemented. And they willingly obliged. they failed to implement even one token reform during that period. And to think that they would do so now is naive. Because for one thing, I do not see SADC wanting to be involved in any of these talks, either as facilitator or in any way involved. Because if I was SADC, I'll be asking myself, to what end and purpose? The GNU of 2008 to 2013 involved the two parties, and they failed to implement even one token reform. What has changed? They just want SADC to rubber stamp, to give it a semblance of acceptance, international or at least regional acceptance, knowing fully well that at the end of the day, no meaningful reforms will be implemented. If I was SADC, I would have absolutely nothing to do with it. If Zanu PF and Triple C want to get involved in some talks, let them go ahead. And as for CC itself, the party has imploded. Chamisa has denounced some of the people who were involved in Triple C all along as infiltrators, Zanu PF infiltrators. So Chamisa will be going into these talks and emerging out of it with himself and a few others, a handful of others, who are still faithful to him in the GNU. All the others will be chucked out. If anything at all, this GNU will be even weaker than the last one. I think this is just a waste of time. I agree with you, Triple C will be going into this, or rather Chamisa and a few others will be going into this for the sake of securing themselves some gravy train seats, and for no other reason. Do you see yourself, SADC, being involved in this one?
You know, when it comes to SADC stance, I will not say much, but I think the best explanation that we could ever get was the one that Dr. Nevis Mumba mentioned. I think that was so so plain, so clear, so straightforward, and so simple. If you have it close, you could play it at the end. I think that would best describe SADC's position. And once that has been established, that this is SADC's position, let us now move forward from all this nonsense to say SADC is going to do this, SADC is good. We are already almost a year gone, and SADC is going to do nothing. Let's get that clear. And I may sound as if I'm a bit harsh on it, but I think Dr. Nevis Mumba, says it clean and clear. I don't know what is your opinion on that. I think that was that was black and white, clear as crystal.
Well, on that point, I've got to agree with you, and and I must admit, I do also agree with Dr. Mumba. We really need to get on with implementing reforms and stop wasting time on these meaningless arguments, which get us absolutely nowhere. I'll play the short clip of Dr. Mumba for some of those listeners maybe who have not heard it.
Well, thank you so much. First of all, let me be clear that the changing of any dynamic or situation in any of our African countries is a preserve of the citizens of that country, in this case, the Zimbabwean people. An election observation team goes there to support the process by observing and being able to release a statement of our observations that, for instance, in Zimbabwe, we raised several issues of transparency and also the independence of the Electoral Commission and things which happen in many other countries, But at the end of the day, once we produce the report and make it available to the Zimbabwean authorities and eventually to the Zimbabwean people, it really remains the preserve of the Zimbabwean people to fight for the freedoms that they need themselves and to correct those issues that have been observed. The reason why we have multiple observation missions is to ensure that, there is a comparison, taking place between the SADC report and the European Union report, the African Union report. And then they can see that those issues that repeat themselves in all these reports, it's up to the Zimbabwean people. And this is where I appeal to all political leaders, not only in Zimbabwe, especially the elections that are coming in Mozambique, that are coming in South Africa, in DRC. We have to make up our minds that, look, at the end of the day, once the people in the country are given an opportunity to monitor the elections, because they also monitor, it starts not during the day of the elections. They must make sure that the constitutional lacunas that can affect a good election are dealt with months before the election. And they must fight to ensure that there's a level playing field. They should never wait for the time when the election is taking place. They must also insist that the electoral commissions and the governments in those countries abide by international norms in holding democratic elections. And this fight must be more vicious before the election comes.
I think we could not put it more clearly. This issue of reforms has been at the heart of the GNU of 2008 to 2013. Not even one token reform was implemented during that golden opportunity. And ever since, the opposition have participated in these flawed elections out of greed. And I think that point must be emphasized. And these talks are not implementing reforms. They're just wasting time either to have another GNU, which one is going to say, if you guys fail to implement reforms during the last GNU, what hope is there that you'll do so now? You are the same people. You fail to implement reforms. And this time you don't even have SADC looking over your shoulder. I think this is a waste of time, and it is important that at the end of it, there will be no reforms implemented, and these guys will go into another election with no reforms. That is totally unacceptable. We are just repeating the same mistake over and over again. 44 years of rigged elections is an outrage. But if we're going to make it 48 years, I think it's totally unacceptable. I've got a few comments here that I was just going to post. I don't know whether you would want to make some comments on the comments from Rebecca there, Ben.
I agree with Rebecca there. She says another 5 years will be wasted with not a single reform implemented and even weaker institutions, and expect the world to pry us. I agree. I think this whole talk of a GNU is to get us off the task at hand. The main task, and like rightfully what the SADC report says. When we look at the report, what amazes me right now is we are looking at part of the report. We are not looking at the whole report. The report has recommendations. What we did wrong, what needs fixing. Those are the reforms that need to be implemented. It's simple that way, And after that, after the report, Dr. Nevis Mumba says it's up to us as Zimbabweans. It's not up to SADC. Where you find there are other people that are, that have got their YouTube channels and different channels that are preaching that we have sources within SADC, we have friends within SADC. All of a sudden, everybody's got friends within SADC. And they are, you are giving people false hope. Here is Dr. Mumba, loud and clear. Says, the onus is not on SADC. The onus is on Zimbabwe. Zimbabwe, the opposition. This is the time. He says now is the time before elections. And the election that we're looking towards is the 2028 election. This is the time that he says, this is the time before the elections to make noise about those reforms, to demand those reforms. And SADC has made it simple. We don't have to go with our own, ideas. We just simply say, you are part and parcel of SADC. We want what SADC is recommended for us to be implemented within our process. Period. That way, there is no way SADC will give them another bill of, the election, a bill of health, when they know that they have actually refused the principles and guidelines of SADC. I think it's been made easier for us over and over and over again. But we choose the hard way. We want elections now with who? With, like you said, rightfully you say, with which opposition? You cannot see the daylight in that opposition right now. So this is the time to get reforms. Then anybody that is willing to go into this race has got a fair chance. Right now, as things stand, come whatever elections, Zanu PF will make a meal out of everybody. Zanu PF does not need your votes anyway. Zanu PF just needs you to stand in line and show democracy. They will sort out all the countings and everything in the back office. At ZEC, they will sort it all out. So I'm feeling sometimes, it's very disheartening how we are failing to get or to grasp such a simple concept. Half the work has already been done for us. We are constantly being reminded, you need not SADC to implement reforms. You need to want those reforms before any election. And it's simple. I guys, I really do not understand. Thank you, Rebecca, for that.
Well, my comment on that one would be what we have got to appreciate from the SADC report and the AU report in last year's election is that they are basically saying this election process is so flawed and so illegal. It fails to meet even our own basic requirements. It fails to meet SADC's guidelines. The question that has got to be asked is, why are our opposition party stubbornly participating in flawed elections? They have consistently participated in flawed elections. Why? We need to address that. That is at the heart of the problem here. And our failure to address it is at the heart of why we're in this mess. Chamisa himself is on record saying, I have plugged all the vote rigging loopholes. The people of Zimbabwe should have asked him, How have you plugged those loopholes? Particularly now with the benefit of hindsight. How is this talks going to plug those loopholes? Or is this part and parcel of this idea of plugging the loopholes? That is at the heart of the problem here. And I think failing to address those problems will only drag us into another 2028 election with not even a token reform implemented. SADC will come and observe. They will say this process is flawed. They will say the whole the process is flawed and illegal, repeating what they said before. But I think what we should not make the mistake of is think that SADC will turn around and say, no, Zanu PF, we're denying you legitimacy. If the people of Zimbabwe participate in flawed elections in the same numbers that participated last year in 2028, then SADC, if I was SADC, I would do exactly what they did last year. Nothing. Because if you, the people of Zimbabwe, are happy to participate in flawed elections, it is not for outsiders to come and interfere in it. If we are happy with these meaningless talks, talking about what? According to this article, they want to talk about unity. Unity. Unity is not the problem in Zimbabwe. Unity is not what rigged the elections last year. Or lack of unity is not what rigged the elections. In fact, if anything at all, Zanu PF and MDC/CCC have been very united in participating in flawed elections. Initially, when MDC was in the GNU, in doing nothing about implementing reforms to stop Zanu PF rigging the elections. They were united in that. They failed to implement even one token reform in 5 years. And they've been participating in these flawed elections, knowing fully well that the process is flawed and that by participating, they're giving Zanu PF legitimacy. So this unity is talking about unity. We don't need unity. What we need is to implement the democratic reforms so that we have got free, fair, and credible elections. Zimbabweans have absolutely no excuse for accepting another rigged elections. Last month, we just witnessed elections in South Africa. And many people who were able to follow it would agree those were free, fair, and credible elections. The opposition in South Africa have all admitted those were free, fair, and credible elections. The people of South Africa have spoken. In Zimbabwe, 44 years after independence, the majority of ordinary Zimbabweans have not had a say in the governance of the country. This is at the heart of the problem in Zimbabwe. This is what we need to talk about, not the unity between Zanu PF and CCC. We really need to be focused, and we need to be well organized to address our fundamental problems.
I agree with you. You know, in conclusion, I would say, you know, no matter how hard you try and twist it, even if you were to talk about the GNU, you know, the fundamental reason for the GNU, for those that do not know, was to implement reforms. Yes, the economic stability was also achieved during that period, but that was not the main reason. The main reason was to change, you know, the way we do or the way we run our ship. in, the ship called Zimbabwe. That was the fundamental reason. And we keep on talking about the SADC report, and we mainly just emphasize on the illegitimate part, and to say that the election was a shamble. We do not take into consideration, none of actually has spoken about those recommendations. I think we would one day, in the near future, probably just revisit those, and just outline some of the recommendations, and then talk about them, and what they stand, and what their benefit is, for the ordinary person, so that at least they can get an understanding of what was being meant. But what my point here is, those recommendations are our best way forward. Use those to state that we cannot go into any election going forward without having these. We must demand, that is, like Dr. Mumba said, that is what our goal should be. That should be our number one, not this talk. There is no amount of talk that can bring out. These two are so far apart. If you find that they are talking and they are agreeing, then there is definitely something wrong between the two, because we want change, and Zanu PF is got nothing to do with change in it. We know Zanu PF, they are hardcore, they are thugs, they are murderers, and their way of doing things is got nothing to do with the say of the people of Zimbabwe. Is we will do it, it's either my way or the highway. That is where we don't want that. There is no democracy in that. We want democracy, like you said. The recent elections of South Africa, man, you're proud of another country for doing something, so good. The standards were high. The way the organization, the way it was done, you could see you could follow. Even if you're not in South Africa, you could follow. They're doing this, they're doing that. Everybody's talking. Everybody seems to be agreeing. Everybody's working on their numbers. It's a beauty to watch democracy at work. And then, you can try and contrast with ours. Well, ours, we just know the part where they give you the results and they go away. The results and they go away. And the dead of the night, they give you the total and they go away for good. That's it. So you can see the difference there. So we want to aspire to better, not to equal, but to better South Africa. Have something that is transparent, and then at the end of the day, we can say, we voted. That is what we are trying to preach or to teach. Where we have to have that passion. We have to have that desire to say we want to be like, And with that, I thank you for the time. Thank you.
Just a quick comment there. Rebecca was talking of we persistently participated and supported in flawed elections. Why? And to what end? Well, the end for the opposition, at least, is clear enough. They've been participating in these flawed elections for the sake of the few gravy train seats that Zanu PF gives for participating. It is the same reason that the opposition, the MDC, failed to implement even one token reform during the GNU. There were people like Chamisa were ministers, were given the ministerial cars, the generous salaries and allowances. And for Morgan Changirai, the $4 million mansion, they didn't want to rock the boat. And indeed, some of the Zanu PF cronies boasted about it when they were asked, why is the MDC guys not implementing reforms? And they clearly stated it. They are not going to rock the boat. They boasted. And they were right. The problem with Zimbabweans is that we do not want to face the truth and deal with it. MDC guys have been participating in flawed elections out of greed. And I have shown on this page and on many other occasions the quotation from David Coulthard's book, and it's the one scrolling at the bottom. Anyone or the opposition knew the 2013 elections were flawed. The process was so flawed, it was ridiculous. But they still participated because of greed. They also knew that Zanu PF was offering a few seats. That some people do not want to accept. But that is the truth. SADC knows that is the reason why the opposition participated in these flawed elections. They knew in 2013 that was the reason why they participated. And that was the reason why SADC did not deny Zanu PF political legitimacy then. And they did the same again in 2018. This last time, I think they wanted to draw a line and say they would not be part of this process. They will call what they can see. The process is flawed. It's up to Zimbabweans themselves to do something about it. And that's exactly what they did. I just wanted to show one more comment from Amos. Amos' comment there is, in a country like Zimbabwe, where everyone in politics seems to be a sellout for the stomach sake, and the ruling party is the mafia organization, participating in election is the way to go. Well, you seem to be contradicting yourself. If you are participating in a flawed process and you know it is flawed, and those who have come to observe the election process are telling you the process is flawed, and you know if you participate, you give the process legitimacy, then, you know, what else can anybody say? You are to blame for it. Why are you failing to see that you are giving the process legitimacy by participating? The opposition have got good reason to participate. They get the few gravitron seats. Zanu PF itself has got every good reason, of course, to rig the elections, because that is the only way they can guarantee themselves staying in power. But for the ordinary person, what benefit are you getting from participating in a flawed process, knowing that it is flawed? And they've been warned that if you participate, you are giving the process legitimacy, and you still go ahead and participate. You know, that is where the problem is. The problem is with the electorate. We don't seem to learn. Chamisa himself was hell-bent on participating last year. Just as much he was hell-bent on participating in 2018 for the sake of the few gravitron seats. In 2018, he is on record saying, we have stringent measures to stop Zanu PF rigging the elections. Where with the stringent measures? He didn't, of course, he didn't have any stringent measures. Where was last year? He claimed that he had plugged all the vote rigging loopholes to justify why he was still participating. Of course, he did not plug any vote rigging loopholes. As SADC and the AU themselves could see. How do you plug the loopholes when you don't even have a verified voters roll? When millions of ordinary Zimbabweans are denied the vote because they're in the diaspora? When there is no free media? When people, particularly in the rural areas, are frog marched to attend Zanu PF rallies and to vote? How can you say those elections were free, fair, and credible? I'll just show another comment by Amos there saying, participating in these elections exposes Zanu PF and SADC report. I think that argument is a vicious and meaningless argument for the simple reason that the 2008 elections, which SADC and the AU condemned as flawed, exposed Zanu PF's rigging. And SADC, who were the ones who proposed the government of national unity, the global political agreement that gave birth to the GNU, wanted Zimbabwe to implement the reforms. And so why did MDC guys fail to implement even one token reform in those 5 years? Are we going to argue that, oh, they did not implement even one token reform because they wanted SADC to come and observe the elections and see the same flaws being repeated again? Was that the purpose of the GNU? The purpose of the GNU was to implement the democratic reforms, to stop Zanu PF rigging the elections. MDC failed to implement even one reform because Mugabe bribed them to make sure that they do not touch reforms. They were given all the comforts, creature comforts of being in power. And in return, they did not implement even one reform. That is the truth. Even if we agree with your argument, Amos, there, that it exposed Zanu PF rigging, when you did expose it, and SADC and AU said those election processes were flawed, why did MDC, Triple C guys still went ahead and accepted their seats? They did. And that's undermining the SADC report and the AU report, where it condemned those elections as flawed. Sorry, Benjamin, I thought you wanted to say something.
Yeah, if I may also add to say, if we're going to take this, report to say as an item of exposing, it would also be used to expose Triple C for their greed, because despite the report that condemned the thing, they still went and took up positions in various seats, that they won. So basically, we are saying this, report exposed everybody, both Zanu PF and Triple C, as greedy, individuals, and have got nothing for the people. I think we need to move away to say, we participated so that we could expose. I think we've been there when Changira boycotted the rerun. There was no need for anyone to expose anybody. The evidence is there. I think if we are going to continue doing this, we are just hiding behind the finger, and we are going to keep on going around and around in circles. Let's look at the report. Let's look at what happened after the report. Let's look at the whole entire story. Let's not just pick the report and dwell on that and call it quits. No. I think we are getting our own narrative out, from the bits that we want. Let's get the full story. What happened? What led to it? And get the whole picture, right? The SADC report denied Zanu PF legitimacy. After that day, right, and exposed what Zanu PF was doing in the scenes during the election, pre and after the election, right? And then from there, when we got the report, what did Triple C do? We don't want to talk about that. Let's talk about that. That is exactly what led to the implosion of Triple C. The actions they did. Let's talk about those. Then after that day, here is Dr. Mumba coming again and saying that the onus is on every Zimbabwean to want to push the agenda for reforms. Okay, 2028. I bet you are going to take the same stance to say we are going to be exposing Zanu for the way they are. Everybody now knows, I'm sure, because they've written reports and reports. It's not the first report that SADC has written. Like you heard, 2008, there was a report that led to the GNU. So I'm sure that it's no longer about exposing. It's about acting. And here is Dr. Mumba. I'm not sure if maybe you heard it, but if you heard it, he says the onus is now on you and me and any other Zimbabwean, right, to push the agenda for reforms, not to expose. We are done with exposing. We have been given recommendations. Now let's use those recommendations to pave the way forward. Thank you.
I'll just quickly comment on this comment that Amos has made. If we do not participate, Zanu proxies will do. Then Zanu PF will continue to rule. It's a fact and it's the truth. Well, I think we need to be consistent here. I think most of us did observe that in last year's elections, whenever the likes of Monzora called his rallies, only a handful of people attended those rallies. Whenever Maduku called his rallies, only a handful of people attended those rallies. In other words, those opposition proxies that you're talking about here are, yes, they are there, but they are so insignificant. If you look at the results themselves, according to ZEC, Mnangagwa got 52% of the vote. Chamisa got 44%. So altogether, the two got 96%. So all the remaining 9 candidates shared 4%. So if you seriously believe that the withdrawal of Chamisa from those elections and his supporters would have not been noticed, I think you're not being honest. What we are seeing here is a repeat of what we saw in 1979, 78, 79, when Ian Smith formed his Zimbabwe Rhodesia internal settlement. Zanu PF and ZAPU boycotted those internal settlements. Muzorewa did not have much support. Stole did not have a lot of support. They participated in the elections. The international community did not give this Zimbabwe Rhodesia internal settlement international recognition, for the simple reason that they could see that this was a farce. And let's not forget here, the proxies, as you call them here, they too are after the few gravy train seats that Zanu PF is offering. Why not? So it's up to each individual party to decide that this process is so flawed, we cannot participate in it and give it legitimacy. And to keep on participating in it because you want some of those few gravitary seats is another matter. And that is, in fact, the matter we should be dealing with. And to keep on pretending that somehow when you participate because you're after those gravitary seats, you're doing the ordinary people of Zimbabwe a great favor is a nonsense argument. Because you're not. By participating in these flawed elections, MDC, CCC have given Zanu PF legitimacy and perpetuated the dictatorship. By participating and conning their supporters to participate in their million in last year's election, what Chamisa has done is he has swept the carpet from underneath SADC. Even if SADC wanted to deny Zanu PF legitimacy last year, they could not, because they could turn around and say, well, Zimbabweans participated in these flawed elections. In their numbers, if they are happy with the flawed system, all we can say is this process is flawed. Just as the same thing that happened with the European Union. In 2018, the European Union were allowed to monitor those elections, and they came as a big team. 246 members came from the European Union, plus the people they recruited within Zimbabwe. And they came up with a comprehensive report condemning the 2018 elections as a farce. As much as they could condemn it, they could not do anything else. They could not say Zanu PF is illegitimate because the Zimbabweans themselves had participated in their numbers. And in 2018, SADC and the AU had endorsed rubber-stamped those elections. This 2023 was different in that all the genuine democratic election observers condemned the 2023 elections. Plus, SADC also condemned it. AU also condemned it. And still our CCC friends went ahead and accepted those seats. In fact, they claimed that they'd won those seats in liberated zones, as if where CCC candidates stood, the electoral process was free, fair, and credible. The voters' roll was the same for everybody. The intimidation was still there. Zanu PF was never has been clever enough ever since the 2008 election. They will never have a clean sweep. They want to give the impression that Zimbabwe is a healthy and functioning democracy. Why would they want to win all the seats? Mnangagwa will never have win by 90% of the vote. He's content with 52. A win is a win. And that gives the opposition the encouragement that maybe next time we can win the elections and participate in future elections. Mnangagwa created Poland to reward those opposition proxies that you're talking about here for participating in 2018 and encouraging them to participate in future elections. We should not deceive ourselves into believing some of these arguments. We really need to make sure that 2028 elections are free, fair, and credible. If no reforms are implemented, it's up to us, the ordinary Zimbabweans, to make sure that we do not participate and give the process legitimacy. It's that simple. We cannot keep on participating and then complain about it, that the process, that the elections were rigged, as if we didn't know. Without reforms, the elections will be rigged. These talks that Chamisa and Mnangagwa are talking about now, they've got nothing to do with implementing reforms. They're just for them to share maybe some of the gravy train seats, or at best to waste time and keep everybody occupied, and until a few months before the elections, they'll say, well, let's forget about the talks, let's go to the elections. And then you'll be enticed or conned into participating in another flawed election and give Zanu PF legitimacy. That is the problem. Thank you very much, Benjamin, and thank you very much, the listeners, for joining us tonight. And I hope you'll be able to join us again tomorrow, same time. Thank you, and good night.
Thank you. Good night to all.